welcome to another More Than It Seems. My name is Risha, and I am the curator here at the History Center of Freeborn County. Here today we have a two-piece dress that I'll go ahead and tell you about more as we get some close-ups, and you'll watch me put it away in a box. So let's go ahead, jump on in. Well, let's take a look at this really beautiful two-piece dress that was kind of common back in the late 1800s to have matching material for a top and bottom that looks like a dress. This one is a really pretty slate gray with that kind of interesting pattern on it, and it's got some embellishments up here on the bodice, as you can see. The way it is put together is alternating hook and eye. So one side you have the hook and the eye on the other side, and then the one up from that is flipped. So it made it a little bit more secure for when she would attach the bodice, so it wouldn't just suddenly open on its own. So it was kind of interesting. A lot of them do have them on the same side all the way up and down, but this one has alternating, which I found that really kind of cool. As we look at this Mrs. C.P. Engen, I would like to let you know that there is a lot of sad things I'm about to talk about in relation to this woman and her family. It'll begin with 1888 in May, and that is when the couple was plunged into grief over the death of their youngest child at the time. And the child isn't named in the newspapers because he or she was 9 months old and passed away from a sickness. It just says that they were ill, and this seems to be sadly, a pretty common trend for this family. In 1901, just 3 years and a month later in June, Bessie Alice is another one of their daughters, and she was born 1898 and was just a little over 3 years old when she also passed away. This was due to pleurisy, and so they lost another of their children just 3 years after that 9-month-old. So that was 1901. In 1902, their younger son, Clarence, he also then passed away in 1902 when he was 2 years old, just a little bit under 2 years old, actually, and it was from diphtheria. The whole home had to be quarantined, so after a third death of their very small children, they had to quarantine in their home, which, of course, they didn't want to spread that to people, but you can imagine that grieving would have been a little bit hard at that time. And next, I would like to give a little bit of levity here. Some happiness is a year later in 1903. This one is about their daughter, Emma Engen. And she was getting married in 1903 to a James T. Svensson. So Emma Svensson was her married name. And they stayed in Albert Lea, as far as I know, for most of their life. We do have a dress in our collections that was sewn by this Emma, their daughter. So that's really cool to see that Emma was okay into adulthood and ended up getting married, and that was a little bit of happiness in their life that you can see in the newspapers instead of some of the sadness, which I'm going to switch back to again for this next tale, which is kind of uncomfortable as well. So in 1904, a Mr. Peter P. Stingen was arrested, and the headline of the article was "Arrested on Ugly Charge." And he was charged with criminal intimacy with Alma, and that is another daughter of Mr. and Mrs. C.P. Engen. In 1904, she was 11 years old, and Peter P. Stingen was a grown man, and he was placed in the county jail, and he remained there for several days, and he wanted to post his bail. He wanted to pay to get out. He wanted to, pay his bail, but the officers at the jail suggested that he not do that. They were advising him to stay there for a while until it kind of calmed down out in the community, because they were afraid that if he left the jail, he would be in danger of, quote, mob violence, unquote. So they told him that for his own safety, he probably should stay in the jail for a little while. But that's, again, another kind of hard thing that happened with the Engens here. Let's go to 1905. So this is another year later. They also had a daughter named Anna, and in 1905, she was about 30 years old, and she had been married already a year to a Roy McBrady. He was a night operator at the Rock Island Depot, but a year after she was married, she passed away. In the papers, it doesn't tell how or why. It just says that she passed away, and so that's another one of their children who was about 30 years old at the time. But at the time she died, she did have 5 sisters and 1 brother alive in this family. So they had a lot of children, but it's really sad to see that a lot of their children also passed. This one is a little bit of a further jump ahead in time, because that was 1905. So we've been kind of going at yearly increments after, 1901. But here in 1910, we have another instance of one of their children passing away. And this would be a Clarice, and she was 6 years old. She was another, again, a daughter of Mr. and Mrs. C.P. Engen. And she passed away in 1910 from tubercular meningitis. So it's not one thing that hurt all of their kids. There's several different things that happened to their children. They lost a lot of children, and they also had a lot of children grow into adulthood, which is and isn't common for the time period. The last thing that I have that I'd like to leave you on is a little bit of a happy thing. So the woman that had this dress, the Mrs. C.P. Engen, in 1931, it was her 69th birthday, and she was pleasantly surprised at the Sorensen cottage, which was where they gathered. That's what it says in the paper. It says that all of her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren were present. So Mrs. C.P. Engen had a really nice 69th birthday in 1931. And so I wanted to leave you with that little happiness that through all of the hardship she did have, she also had joy with her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. And with that, thanks for listening.